In 2017, there were 152 police officers that died in line of duty. My husband was one of them. My name's Diana Cox. I'm the surviving spouse of Sergeant Joe Cox with the Allen County Sheriff's Department. It's an honor to be here tonight, but I must admit, when Eric Johnson originally asked me, at first I wanted to say no. But I told him I would pray about it, and I did, and I asked myself these questions. Would it glorify God? Would it honor Joe? Or could it help someone else? Tonight, I'm hoping to do all three. My husband was a true hero. He served 6 years in the Marine Corps. He was a sniper on the SWAT team, a firearms instructor, a canine handler, and the list goes on. Joe did many things, and he did them all with excellence. More importantly, Joe was a man of God. He was an amazing husband, father, grandpa, friend, and a mentor to many. Joe and I always knew that God would use our story. I just never imagined that it would be here tonight with all of you, and that I would be standing here to tell it alone. Many of my friends have told me that I should write a book. I reminded them that my story doesn't have a happy ending, but they said that it didn't matter. You see, in order to tell you about Joe, I first need to go back 22 years. On February 13th of 1997, my high school sweetheart, my husband of 15 years, collapsed in front of me. At the hospital, I was told that Scott had had a brain aneurysm, was in a coma, and had a slim chance of living. Days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months. Scott remained in a coma. After nearly 3 months, Scott died on May 8th of 1997. I found myself a widow at age 36 with 4 children. If Joe were here, he would tell you that his wife, Angie, was diagnosed with liver cancer when she was 23. She had several surgeries over the years, but when she was 28, Joe found out that her cancer had returned. They also found out that their 2-year-old son had cancer at the same time. Angie was given months to live, and she died October 5th of 98. Just 1 month later, Joe was at Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis so that Joseph could have surgery to remove his kidney along with the tumor. During this same time in 1998, my oldest daughter had been on a missions trip to Haiti with Youth for Christ, and when she returned, she became very sick. And she was in and out of hospitals in Fort Wayne. But eventually, Melissa was sent to Riley Hospital as well. And that's where Joe and I met, at a children's hospital with 2 sick kids. 6 months later, Joe had me pulled over for speeding and proposed to me. We were married 3 months after that. We had 6 kids, ages 2 to 16. Joe was the happy to my sad story. Joe was my second chance. Life was good. Fast forward to February 12th, 2017. Joe was working second shift and was expected to be home around 9:30. I was at home waiting for Joe, and I was actually thinking about the last night that I spent with Scott 20 years prior. And then the unthinkable, there was a knock at the door. The police officer told me that Joe had been working an accident and there was a problem. Being an officer's wife, I knew that he was telling me all that he could. I knew something bad had happened, but I still had hope. He told me he'd be driving me to Parkview Regional Medical Center. When we got to the hospital and I saw rows and rows of police cars, I knew something terribly wrong had happened. They took me in a quiet room, and the doctor told me that Joe had had a heart attack. They did all they could, but he didn't make it. This time, I'm 56 years old, 6 adult children, 13 grandchildren. I found out very quickly that a line of duty death was much different than with my first husband. It was so public, so much trauma, so much more that needed to be done. Supporting Heroes contacted me early on to provide financial assistance, which was very much appreciated. Just days after Joe's death, I got a letter in the mail informing me that I no longer had health insurance, but I'd have to worry about that a different time. We were busy planning a funeral. The Allen County Sheriff's Department had not had a line of duty death in 20 years. Supporting Heroes contacted the department within the first 24 hours and provided them with detailed information on heart attack line of duty deaths and offered their assistance. They also helped the Sheriff's Department to complete the PSOB claim, which included countless emails and phone calls. And they continued to follow up with the claim until it was approved. I also found out that someone from Supporting Heroes had driven to Fort Wayne to attend Joe's celebration service. They wanted to know more about Joe, and it meant the world to me. Joe was more than just a name and a badge number to Supporting Heroes. He mattered. In an email from Eric, he said, "The more I learn about him, the more I regret not knowing him." 2 years later, and Supporting Heroes is still here for me and my family. They have generously offered to cover the costs for myself, my children, and my now 17 grandchildren to go to Washington, D.C. for Police Week in May to honor Joe. I love honoring Joe. But when I think about it, that wasn't the most important thing to Joe. After being on the SWAT team for nearly 18 years, Joe stepped down in December, just months before his death. He wrote a very intentional letter to the team and read it to them on the last day that he trained with them. I'd like to read you a portion of what Joe wrote. "The nickname many have given me, Jesus Joe, I don't mind that, but I must say I'm not worthy to be called that. I think many of you may think, based on the nickname, that you think I am somehow better, less sinful, or more worthy than you. I am not. I just happen to know who Jesus Christ is and have a personal relationship with him. We will all die someday. What then? If you don't know, don't you think it would be a good idea to figure that out? No one knows when that day will come. Thanks for all the great memories. I will see some of you more often than others. I will miss all of you. Be safe as you continue to do a dangerous work in an ever-increasingly dangerous society." February 12th was the last time that Joe and I went to church together. The message that morning was on eternity. The pastor even said, "Today may be someone's last day." Joe wrote in his Bible in red, "To rejoice is a choice." None of us here got to choose the difficult circumstances that we find ourselves in, but we do have a choice how we will respond. 1 Thessalonians 5:16 says, "To rejoice always." My story is not how I would have written it, but I've come to realize that it's not my story. God has a purpose and a plan, and it's his story. Thank you.